You have been lied to. Losing everything is not the end of your financial life. For the 1%, it is a scheduled wealth transfer, and they use absolute zero as a weapon. Look around you. The media is screaming about the 2026 economic collapse. They want you terrified of losing your savings, terrified of hitting rock bottom. But while the middle class is paralyzed by the fear of going broke, the ultra-wealthy are quietly preparing to restart from nothing because they know a secret that you do not. They know that financial crashes do not destroy wealth. They merely transfer it. And to catch that wealth, sometimes you have to empty your hands completely. For the 99% of society, $0 is the abyss. It is the ultimate nightmare. It means eviction, hunger, and the absolute end of the road. When average people hit zero, they panic. They scramble for overtime hours. They sell their assets for pennies, and they beg the system for a lifeline. But for the top 1%, $0 is not a trap. It is a zero-gravity state. It is a strategic reset button. When a billionaire loses everything, they do not see a dead end. They see a clean slate, a chance to shed bad debt, to wipe out liabilities, and to rebuild an empire without the heavy chains of past mistakes. Think back to 1929. The stock market collapsed, and the streets were filled with broken men who thought their lives were over. Yet, from the ashes of the Great Depression, a select few families emerged with more land, more monopolies, and more absolute power than ever before. The exact same thing happened in 2008. Millions lost their homes, but the elite bought up those exact same neighborhoods for a fraction of the cost. How did they do it when the banks were freezing credit and cash was disappearing? They did it because they do not rely on the money you keep in your wallet. They rely on an invisible blueprint, a system so deeply hidden in plain sight that most people will live their entire lives without ever noticing it. Today, we are going to expose that blueprint. We're going to show you exactly how the elite survived the crash and how they use the illusion of $0 to buy back the world.
Educational and historical content only, not financial advice.
Imagine taking a billionaire, stripping away every bank account, every credit card, every mansion, and leaving them on the street with absolutely $0. What happens next? Do they panic like the rest of society? Do they start filling out minimum wage job applications? No. Within a few short years, they will have millions back in their control. And the reason why exposes the greatest financial illusion ever sold to the public. You see, you have been taught that wealth is the number sitting in your checking account. You have been conditioned to believe that paper money is the ultimate safety net. But paper money is just a tool. It is a byproduct of real wealth, not the cause of it. If you strip away a billionaire's cash, they are still a billionaire, because their true net worth is not stored in a bank vault. It is stored in their invisible assets. What exactly are invisible assets? They are the resources that cannot be taxed, cannot be inflated away, and cannot be seized by a desperate government during a crash. The most powerful of these invisible assets is the Rolodex, the network, and the absolute power of trust. When a middle-class worker hits $0, they have nobody to call except debt collectors. Their network consists of other people who are also struggling, also terrified, and also broke. But when a member of the elite hits absolute zero, they pick up the phone. They call a former business partner, a venture capitalist, or a private equity firm. They do not ask for a job. They ask for a meeting. In the upper echelons of society, trust and access are the only currencies that actually matter. A man with $0 but absolute trust from high net worth investors is infinitely richer than a man with $1 million in the bank who nobody trusts. The elite spend decades building a track record, a reputation for making money, so that when the inevitable crash comes, their reputation acts as an impenetrable shield. Think about the economic collapse of 2008. Banks stopped lending. Cash flow dried up overnight. Average citizens could not get a loan to save their homes. Yet, major institutional players who had just bankrupted their own companies were somehow securing hundreds of millions of dollars in fresh capital the very next week. How is that mathematically possible? It is possible because the financial system is designed to protect those who control access. Access to the right boardrooms, access to asymmetric information, and access to limitless capital. When you possess these invisible assets, having $0 is just a temporary accounting error. It is a momentary pause in the game. The ultra-wealthy know that if they lose their money, they can simply leverage their network to conjure more of it out of thin air. They trade their vision and their track record for new capital. The 99% focus their entire lives on accumulating visible assets. They buy expensive cars, heavily mortgaged houses, and luxury clothes to maintain the illusion of being rich. They trap themselves in a vicious cycle of consumer debt, terrified that they might lose their fragile status. But when the engineered crash of 2026 finally hits, those visible assets will plummet in value. The bank will take the house, the car will be repossessed, and the illusion of middle-class wealth will shatter into a million pieces. Meanwhile, the 1% are quietly hoarding invisible assets. They are building alliances in the shadows, securing favors, and positioning themselves precisely where the capital will flow when the dust settles. They understand that when the system resets, the individuals with the strongest networks will be the ones who dictate the new rules of the world. They will use their access to buy up your foreclosed properties, your distressed businesses, and your discounted stocks for pennies on the dollar. So, the next time you look at your bank account and feel the suffocating panic of approaching zero, remember this truth. The digital number on the screen is not your real wealth. If you want to survive the massive wealth transfer of 2026, you must stop chasing paper money and start building the invisible assets that make paper money entirely irrelevant. But how do you actually buy back the world when your own pockets are completely empty? The answer lies in the most ruthless and heavily guarded secret of the financial elite: the OPM loophole, other people's money. When the average person hears the word debt, they feel a shiver of anxiety. They think of credit card bills, suffocating student loans, and the crushing weight of a 30-year mortgage. For the 99%, debt is a heavy chain that keeps them tied to a desk, working 40 hours a week just to pay the interest to a system that does not care if they live or die. But for the top 1%, debt is not a burden. Debt is a weapon. And in the aftermath of a massive financial crash, it is the exact weapon they use to conquer the market. Think about the psychology of the modern banking system. If a middle-class worker loses their job and walks into a bank to ask for a $10,000 loan just to survive the winter, the bank will laugh them out of the building. They will demand collateral, a perfect credit score, and absolute proof of income. But if a billionaire bankrupts a massive corporation, wiping out millions in shareholder value, and walks into that exact same bank the very next month, they will walk out with a $50 million line of credit. Why? Because the system is not designed to evaluate your moral character. It evaluates your leverage. And the elite understand a very dark truth. If you owe the bank $10,000, the bank owns you. But if you owe the bank $50 million, you own the bank. This brings us to the most misunderstood tool in the elite playbook: strategic bankruptcy, to the working class. Bankruptcy is a mark of ultimate failure. It is a source of deep shame, a public declaration that you have lost the game of life. Average people will drain their entire life savings, sell their family heirlooms, and destroy their physical health just to avoid the stigma of declaring bankruptcy. But in the boardrooms of the ultra-wealthy, bankruptcy is not a failure. It is a legal car wash. It is a highly orchestrated maneuver designed to separate the toxic liabilities from the valuable assets. When a crash hits and a billionaire's investments go underwater, they do not panic and drain their personal checking accounts to save a sinking ship. They isolate the damage. They use a complex web of shell companies, offshore trusts, and limited liability structures to ensure that when the fire burns, it only burns the paper they no longer want. They let the corporation die. They let the bad debt default. They file for strategic bankruptcy and hand the toxic ashes over to the creditors. But here is the secret the media will never tell you. The real wealth, the intellectual property, the brand value, the physical real estate, was already legally separated and safely hidden away long before the crash ever happened. They hit the reset button. They wiped the slate perfectly clean. And because they still hold their invisible assets, their network, and their absolute ruthless understanding of the law, they simply pivot. They walk into the private offices of institutional lenders. They pitch a new vision. They say the market has crashed, assets are bleeding, and there is blood in the streets. Give me $100 million of your money, and I will buy up the distressed real estate of the middle class at a 90% discount. And the banks give it to them. They use other people's money to buy the foreclosed homes of the exact same working class families who were just destroyed by the crash. They use debt to acquire hard assets at rock bottom prices. And then they rent those exact same assets back to the middle class who can no longer afford to own anything. This is not an accident. This is the design of the matrix. The system actively rewards those who understand how to weaponize $0. If you are terrified of losing your money, you will always be a victim of those who play the game with other people's money. The 2026 wealth transfer will not be executed with the personal cash of the billionaires. It will be executed with the leverage they command from the very institutions that deny you a basic loan. The fundamental difference between the 1% and the 99% is not how much money they have. It is how they perceive the value of their existence. When you fall to $0, the true nature of your programming is revealed. The 99% are trapped in the time for money exchange, a psychological prison designed by the industrial era. When an average person hits absolute zero, their first instinct is survival. They look for a job. They look for a boss. They look for anyone who will pay them $20 an hour to perform a repetitive task. They believe that the only way out of poverty is to work harder, to work longer, and to sacrifice more of their finite life force. But this is the poverty loop. If you sell your time, you are selling a non-renewable resource. You only have 24 hours in a day. And the system is designed to tax and inflate your earnings faster than you can save them. By the time the 2026 crash hits, the people selling their time will be the first to be discarded, as corporations automate and downsize to protect their own margins. The elite, however, do not sell their time, especially not when they have $0. They sell vision. When a billionaire hits zero, they do not look for a paycheck. They look for a problem to solve, and they look for the capital to solve it. They understand that the world is overflowing with money, but it is starving for leadership and clarity. While the masses are fighting over crumbs, the elite are drafting the blueprints for the next giant leap. They spend their last few dollars on a clean suit and a flight to meet a decision maker. They do not ask for a salary. They ask for a percentage of the value they create. They leverage their invisible assets, their knowledge of the markets and their reputation, to convince those with stagnant capital to move it. This is the secret of vision arbitrage. The elite buy your time for $20, and then they sell the product of that time to the world for $2,000. They keep the difference, the spread, the profit, and they use it to buy more of your time. This cycle continues until they own the very air you breathe, and you are left wondering why working 80 hours a week still feels like drowning. To escape the 2026 crash, you must kill the employee mindset within you. You must realize that the rich do not work for money. Money works for them. Even when they have nothing in their pockets, they possess the mental software to command the flow of millions. If you spend your life waiting for a leader to give you a job, you will spend your life at the mercy of the crash. But if you learn to see the world as a series of systems to be optimized and problems to be solved with other people's money, then hitting zero is nothing more than a temporary state of mind. The elite are not smarter than you. They just refuse to play a game where the only thing they have to trade is their own life. We are standing on the precipice of the greatest financial shift in modern history. The 2026 crash is not a random economic disaster. It is a meticulously scheduled wealth transfer. When the markets finally break and the headlines scream that trillions of dollars have vanished into thin air, you must remember one chilling reality. The money did not disappear. It simply moved. It moved from the terrified, shaking hands of the middle class into the iron grip of the prepared elite. The panic sellers will liquidate their retirement portfolios at the exact bottom of the market, desperate to hold on to whatever paper cash they can find. But the elite will not be hoarding fiat currency because they know that paper money is already dying a slow death through inflation. Instead, they will use their invisible assets, their pristine networks, and billions of dollars of other people's money to sweep through the wreckage and buy the actual world for pennies on the dollar. What exactly are they targeting while you are distracted by the red numbers on the stock market ticker? They are quietly hoarding the hard assets that hold true, undeniable intrinsic value. They are buying up vast tracts of agricultural farmland and physical residential real estate, securing the very ground you live on and the food you will need to eat. They are accumulating massive vaults of precious metals like physical gold and silver, not as speculative day trades, but as ancient, indestructible wealth preservers that have survived the collapse of every major empire in human history. And they are taking absolute control of the energy sector, because the families who control the power grid and the natural resources control the absolute future of the global economy. When the dust of 2026 finally settles, the 99% will wake up to a new reality, a world where they own absolutely nothing. They will rent their homes from massive corporate conglomerates. They will lease their cars, and they will pay a permanent premium just to exist in a system fully owned and operated by the 1%. The billionaires will have successfully hit the reset button. They will have used the illusion of $0, the strategic power of bankruptcy, and the infinite leverage of the banking system to rebuild their empires larger and more tyrannical than ever before. The trap has already been set. The pieces are already moving on the board, and the final countdown has already begun. So, the ultimate question remains: what will you do when the crash finally arrives? Will you allow the media to dictate your emotions? Will you panic, sell your assets, and willingly hand over your financial independence to the elite? Or will you finally break the programming that has kept your family trapped in the poverty loop for generations? The 2026 wealth transfer is not a prophecy. It is a mathematical certainty. The system is actively hunting for the unprepared, the uneducated, and the fearful. But now, you know their secret. You understand that $0 is not a death sentence. It is a blank canvas. You understand the devastating power of other people's money, the strategic brilliance of the invisible asset, and the lethal difference between selling your time and selling a vision. Knowledge without execution, however, is completely useless. If you close this video and return to your 9-to-5 routine without changing your psychological framework, you have already lost the game. The elite are counting on your complacency. They are betting trillions of dollars that you will do absolutely nothing, that you will remain paralyzed by fear while they buy up your future for pennies on the dollar. It is time to make a final choice. You can remain a silent spectator in the greatest financial shift of our lifetime. Or you can step out of the matrix. You can start building your invisible network today. You can start learning the ruthless language of the ultra-wealthy, and you can position yourself to intercept the wealth that is about to fall from the sky. This channel, Mindset for Wealth, is your sanctuary in the coming storm. It is the one place where the true history of money is exposed, where the hidden blueprints of the elite are decoded, and where you will find the exact mental framework required to build absolute financial freedom. Do not let the 1% win without a fight. Hit the subscribe button right now, turn on the notification bell, and join a community of minds that refuse to be broken by a rigged system. We will navigate the 2026 crash together. We will uncover the darkest secrets of the global economy, and we will teach you exactly how to rebuild your empire from absolute zero. The clock is ticking. The great wealth transfer has already begun. Subscribe to Mindset for Wealth and prepare your mind for what comes next. Because the truth is hiding in plain sight, and we are just getting started.